And a special one here today on the PHLY Sixers podcast. And no stranger to the Philadelphia basketball community at all. Joining us for the first time on our show from the All NBA, All City NBA podcast. And of course, from ESPN, doing a great job, as always, for many years there, calling games as well. Tim Legler here with Devon Givens. Tim, how you doing, man?
Devon, great to be on, man. I'm doing very well. How about you?
Oh, doing pretty good. Be much better if the record was flipped a little bit for the Sixers here, as we talk about them, of course, after everything they've done this offseason. But 22 games in, and here we are. But that's where I want to start, because I know with you and Adam Mars on the All NBA podcast, we're discussing your all disappointment team on today's show. And we're having our discussion before the Sixers take on the Indiana Pacers on Friday night, December 13th, an opportunity for them to win their fifth game out of 6, which is something pretty big with all things considered with this basketball team. But from where they are and the all disappointment team that you and Adam were talking about, Joel was on your list. 5 games of a possible 22 of the Sixers games this season, and it has been a disappointment, but he was your first choice. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't want to, bang on guys that are, missing games due to injury. But look, the bottom line is this: he's missed chunks of time pretty much every season, and even at times when they've needed him to be healthy and had his normal productive self, he has struggled at times with injuries in the postseason. But every summer, I go and I try to hit the reset button for everybody, and I give them the benefit of the doubt coming into a new year. And when you looked at what they did in adding Paul George, adding Caleb Martin, they end up, and we didn't even know how good Jared McCain was necessarily, but you look at it now, man, you added that steal of a pick midway down the first round. When you add those new pieces into what this team has done recently and what they've done in the regular season, you're thinking, all right, man, if everything goes right, this team absolutely could be the last team standing against Boston. And that's really what we're talking about, because it's almost like disingenuous to say, oh, this team could win a championship, this team could go to the final. You have to put Boston as the measuring stick. So really what the rest of the East is, who's going to be the last team standing against them? And at that point, look, if it were to be Philly and they were healthy, hey man, that team has a chance to possibly beat them. But you can't get ahead of yourselves even talking finals. You got to talk about everything in relation to the Celtics. And going into the season, adding Paul George, adding Caleb Martin, picking up Jared McCain, this looks like a team on paper. You say, man, that should be enough, because now you got the point covered, you've got the big man covered, and now you got a scoring wing that can create his own offense that plays the other end of the floor too. This is now a team that's as a complete a team as any Joel Embiid has had since he's been in Philadelphia. And yet here we are, 5 games available. When he has played, he's had a couple games that were better than others, but overall 5 games in, 40% from the field, 22 points a game. These aren't Joel Embiid type numbers. Certainly not only being available for 5 games, it has completely put their season off the rails. Now, Paul George also is in that category. He's missed a lot of times too, but he has played twice as many games, or more than twice as many games as Embiid. So and Maxi's missed some time too. So it's not just Embiid, but clearly he is maybe the most unstoppable offensive force in the game, and he's only given that team 5 games. And I'm not blaming him for the injuries, but it's just disappointing that we find ourselves here looking at Philly right now in the 12th spot in the Eastern Conference and winning a little bit lately. So maybe it's starting to come together, and Embiid is back now. So let's see if they can be heard from here sooner than later. They will be at some point. Will it all come together before the first of the year? That's what I'm waiting to see. And how quickly will they remind all of us like how good this team could be at their ceiling? But to this point, is there any other way to label it than a disappointing season so far for the Sixers?
No, the team and Embiid himself, as you just mentioned. And you also pointed out a little bit better over the last few games. 4 of their last 5. They're going for 5 of their last 6 tonight against the Indiana Pacers. His best game on Sunday against the Chicago Bulls. Tim, he started 0 for 6, and then he ended up with 30-plus points in that game with double-double. He was tremendous down the stretch with he looking more comfortable like he always does. The Joel Embiid of himself, as you pointed out, mid-range jump shots, some buckets in close. Didn't get it to the free throw line as much as he used to, because he didn't need to in this particular game, just coming back. But when you do talk about where they are right now, two things the NBA Cup with where they are in the, if you want to call it, the losers bracket, not playing in it. They have, with the new schedule, a ton of time here. So their last game was on Sunday. And since then, since we've discussed both he and George mainly with their knee injuries missing time, they've had 4 days off where they have 2 games of practice, 2 days of practice on Wednesday and Thursday, game on Friday. They're off the weekend. They take on the Charlotte Hornets on Monday, and then they're off 3 more days, the Charlotte Hornets on Friday. So favorable schedule for them right now with Indiana tonight, 2 with Charlotte, but so much time in between. And the second part of that, Tim, is the favorable Eastern Conference, if you will, from 5 on down, 6 on down, because while the Sixers have dug themselves a hole, there's 60 games remaining, and they're not too far out. Now, not looking at the standings because they're not good enough right now to look at the standings, but they can only do one thing at a time, and that's handle their business in front of them. So when you look at them right now with those things, how do they get to the point where, all right, what do you do in the locker room? What do you do as a coaching staff to get these guys? It starts with them being on the floor, but how do you push past that of all the things that have happened so bad this season so far to get to a point where they get themselves back on track?
I think obviously, number one, guys need to be available, and it looks like that's going to be the case. Hopefully, going forward here, Embiid, big game the other night, slow start, finish strong.
Yep.
One of the things you'll notice, they've won 4 out of 5 games, and one of the things if you look at it and be honest about it, because this does matter. Schedule is part of the context. It always is in the NBA. You do have to look at it, and it starts with when you're struggling. The first thing you have to start to do to turn it around, beat the teams that you're better than. And that's what they're going to get here. You got a struggling Indiana team that they caught fire last year. They became one of the best stories in the league to go to the conference finals. Took advantage of some teams with injuries along the way. You get Giannis banged up in that series. You get a Knicks team that was banged up by the time they finished that series. So the Pacers, give them credit. They played a very difficult style to defend, and they took advantage of not getting teams at full strength. The next thing you know, they're this unexpected conference finalist. Well, okay, now the standard has been set. You have expectations for them. Well, they've also, by the way, were on that list we just did earlier today on most disappointing teams. And I put Tyrese Halliburton in this category for his play, not being injured. He just doesn't look like the same guy. He's not as impactful. He doesn't put as much pressure on defenses. He doesn't look as confident. Too many games, I don't notice him. And star players, that's just not the case in this league. Like, your floor has got to be higher than his floor on a bad night. So that's a disappointing team right now. They're struggling. They just lost to Charlotte Charlotte was on an 8-game losing streak, beat Indiana in Indiana. So Indiana right now is not in a good place mentally. There's a lot of questions about what's going on inside the locker room with Rick Carlisle and the connection to the team. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on with them. Guess what? They show up in your building on Friday night, you got to beat that team. Flat out, no excuses, doesn't matter. You got to beat that team. And then you get back-to-back games with Charlotte, super shorthanded, missing their 2 best offensive players. And you've got to get that team. Even though they beat Indiana the other night, they've lost 8 out of 9. You got back-to-back games with them, home and away. Those have to be 2 wins. So when you start to do that, and Philly's starting to do that, they beat Chicago. Orlando, who's shorthanded, they win that game. That's a quality win because they're still tough to beat no matter what. Charlotte, Detroit, right? Again, 2 bottom-feeding type teams. But listen, it's got to start somewhere. And that's where it starts for Philly. So for me, sweep these 3, get to 10 and 15, and then if everybody's healthy, you go to Cleveland on Saturday, December 21st, possibly on a 5-game winning streak with guys back against one of the best teams in the NBA. There you go. That's your measuring stick game to find out where Philadelphia really is. But you don't get there in the right place mentally unless you win these 3 games.
Tim Legler joining us here on the PHLY Sixers Podcast, discussing the 76ers and their slow start, the disappointing start to the season. And when you look at Tyrese Maxey having his struggles a little bit, looked pretty good with his first career triple-double in that win against Chicago on Sunday. And then there's the Paul George factor, Tim, where you're figuring out how to get him involved. As you said, he's played 2 times more than Embiid, but still trying to find his way because before the game on Sunday, they had played a combined 6 minutes together against the Orlando Magic 2 weeks prior to the Chicago game. So they still have that feeling out period. So with 22 games games in. We know how important training camp is when you have somebody as important as Paul George coming in, where the two-man game is already there for Embiid and Maxey. How do you see him? He's as plug and play as they come, but with the knee injury, getting used to the knee brace, as he discussed in practice on Thursday, getting used to that knee brace. How do you see them getting him going, getting him involved within the flow of the offense, and especially with the other two All-Stars?
Yeah, I mean, you have two all-star scorers already, two guys that get high usage rate in Maxey and Embiid, and they operate from different areas of the floor. So Paul George has what's left, which is on the wing, the short ISO area. That's where he operates from. Tyrese Maxey's more up, between the hashes on the sidelines above that. That's where he likes to operate, or he's downhill at the rim. Embiid's all over the floor. There's that wing area. That's where the need was. That's where they wanted to go get a guy that can operate with his own handle inside ball screen, in isolations. He can post guys up with his size as well as a scorer. So they wanted to check that box. Now we have a complete offense. Every area of the floor is covered with high-level offensive talent. He has not yet found that rhythm because the lack of continuity between the three guys, that just doesn't happen overnight. You don't just show up and figure out how to play together. So I'm giving him a little bit of benefit of the doubt right now, but he's got to get it going, man. They didn't bring him in here to do what he's doing, which is 16 points a game on 42% shooting. Like that's not who Paul George is historically. That's not what they were expecting. He's got to start to get it going. He's had 3 20-point games all year out of 12 games that he's played. That's not what you're expecting with Paul George. And eventually there will be more nights when Paul George is your second best offensive player and Maxey has more nights as your third best offensive player. There's going to be more nights of that if this team is in a really healthy place. If you have a lot of nights where Paul George is an afterthought offensively, or he's not really looking close to the guy he was when he was playing with the Clippers or the Pacers or the Thunder or wherever else he was earlier in his career, I don't think that's a good sign for Philadelphia. The guy can do certain things with his size and his handle and his creativity, manipulation of the ball, and his deep shooting. He can do certain things because of his size that Tyrese Maxey can't. So I think there's got to be more nights where Paul George becomes a little bit more of a primary focus in your offensive possessions. He hasn't gotten close to that yet. New team, new environment, 2 stars already in place. He's dealt with injuries. You add it all up, you're going to get kind of what Paul George has done so far. But now let's see, once he's back and feeling better, he starts to ramp up his usage and his fingerprint on the game, because it has been fairly mild to this point, to say the least.
Absolutely. And the final one for you, before we get out of here, I have to ask you, not a lot of bright spots, but you did mention Jared McCain, one as a shooter yourself. What are you seeing, number one, from the selection to your draft analysis about him coming out of Duke into this particular situation with Philadelphia? And then secondly, Guerschon Yabusele, a star of the Olympics, and he comes to Philadelphia, another nice addition late for Daryl Morey in the front office to add him to this team before, of course, we know about the injuries that would hit the team overall. 2 bright spots, though, for this basketball team. Your thoughts on both of them?
Yeah, no doubt. McCain, first of all, how he impresses me the most, and I was able to call the Philadelphia 76ers at Lakers game earlier this year. I called that game. So it was my first real up-close look at Jared McCain, other than just watching him on film or a little bit. I saw him in Vegas Summer League. He's got a relentlessness about him, man, and a pace with which he comes at you that just exudes confidence. He's incredibly confident on the floor for a young player. And with the irony with all of this is, think about going into draft night, getting down to the 16th pick, Lakers sitting on the board at 17, Sixers go McCain, Lakers take Connect. There's a celebration, in LA. They're like, we got the guy. Can't believe Dalton Connect was sitting there. I think he was the most NBA ready player, it looked like to me, coming into the draft. And he was a little bit older, but it's funny. He's 22. People were acting like the guy was 30 years old. He's 22 years old. But, first round picks don't look 22 anymore. They look 18, 19. So he was 22. So a lot of teams started to pass on him, and then it was like a trickle-down effect. Well, why didn't you take him? Well, maybe there's something going on. I'm not going to take him.
I thought the Sixers should have taken him at 16 when we were doing the show. Yeah.
That pick, based on the talent that they had accumulated and the spacing you need off of that, and a guy very comfortable standing and waiting on shots, I thought the same thing. The irony is, now you're sitting here, and a lot of Sixers fans are going, man, you know what? No, forget that. I'm happy with McCain. We're good here. And Connect, by the way, has had his impact felt certainly in LA, and he's made a splash there as well. So both guys thriving. It's great. But draft night, there was definitely a sense of disappointment in Philadelphia that they didn't get Connect. And I think McCain has erased a lot of that in a town that is very skeptical about a lot of things, particularly when it comes to rookies. They've given a guy a lot of love because he deserves it. And then PHLY is a guy that I feel bad for him because he's had to play more center than he was expecting to with Embiid being out. And I think his more natural position is going to be more guarding the fours in this league. But he's, again, a bright spot, plays hard, has proven he can step out and knock down shots when he gets space. So became a big fan of his, watching him in Paris as well. And Philadelphia got themselves a guy that's going to be a very important rotational player for them all season and probably into some very important playoff games.
Yeah, two players that have really held their own, and a big surprise for the Sixers, who are 7-15, having a disappointing season. But not a disappointment with our first conversation with the one and only Tim Legler. Big Five stuff, man. How you feel about, real fast, how you feel about the Big Five Classic that is going on these last two seasons? St. Joe's took this one, took two, the first two actually. But I know you, of course, big LaSalle guy, but you're a Big Five person as well. Philadelphia community, we all know and love Tim Legler. So what do you think about the Big Five Classic coming back and how it's done these first 2 years?
Great. Well, just grateful, first of all, that they because obviously the Big Five had taken on less importance than it did. Certainly when I played there, it was a big part of why I left Richmond, Virginia to go to Philadelphia to play college basketball was the Big Five, the Palestra, sold out doubleheaders. Everybody in the city was good. Like there were 3 teams ranked in the top 25 my freshman year. One team won the national championship that year in Villanova. So, and Temple was number 1 in the country most of the next 2 years. So this is the level of basketball that I bought into going up there. And the Big Five games actually for us in-house meant more than your conference games. Like you wanted to go play Temple or whoever, Villanova St. at the Palestra, sold out, doubleheader, streamers coming down. Like you looked for that environment. And obviously, for a variety of reasons, we kind of got away from that over the years. We just didn't have as much importance. So to me, this is a way to capture that relevance again and give that city title meaning, because we took it very, very seriously. And it seemed like for a period of time there, it didn't have the weight. It didn't mean as much. Teams weren't playing each other every year in the city, like every team playing every other team. They got away from that for a while. So it's back. I'm glad to see it. Because for people that aren't aware of what the Big Five's all about, I could tell you as a kid being recruited in Richmond, Virginia, and VCU, University of Virginia, University of Richmond, Virginia Tech, all over me. How did they let this kid from Richmond escape their clutches and end up in Philadelphia playing at LaSalle? A lot of it had to do with those Big Five games, which I witnessed on my official visit to that school and basically was sold by the time I got through the second game.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Double headers, as you said, triple headers now at the Big Center with all 6 teams. It's the Big Five, but of course, we also know about the City Six and all 6 teams here locally. Tim, can't thank you enough for spending some time. We got 60 games left, man, so I'm sure we'll catch up again throughout the season, and maybe the season will be back on track for Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and the rest of the group. Have a good one, man. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Devon.
You got it, man.
We all silly like the mayor.